A very good evening and afternoon and welcome to RNI TV. Me, your host S. Villa Caleb, and remember this is the Did You Know segment that comes each and every Wednesday on your most favorite channel. So today we're going to look at 5 very important people who are in the black community, who are actually black slaves who are wealthy. And without further ado, remember to like, subscribe and share, and remember to leave a comment below anytime you feel that something is very interesting. Without any more time being wasted, let's begin. So on number 1 we have Paul Coffey. Paul Coffey was born in 1759 in Massachusetts. He was born of a freed father. His name was Coffey Slocum. Coffey Slocum was actually a freed slave man during those periods in the United States of America. So Coffey Paul, who was the son of Coffey Slocum, was actually an entrepreneur and a sea captain. You know, back then the seas were the ones that were really used in terms of trade and most of other things that you could think of, that is bringing slaves to America, taking goods around the world and all that. And remember in 1776, Paul Coffey never went to school. He taught himself how to read and write, things to do with arithmetics, things to do with entrepreneurship, and he ended up being a shrewd manager and a shrewd sea captain back in that year. And as he went on and amassed a lot of wealth, and by the end of towards the end of the 1700s, he was able to purchase a 160-acre piece of land in the United States of America. Imagine he was a black person who managed to buy such a wholesome amount of land in that country. Think about it. So he also was credited as the first free African American to visit the White House to see the president of that time. During the 1700s, our presidents of the United States of America were like George Washington. There were people like John Adams, John Quincy Adams. So he either met one of the presidents, and I'll leave you to leave the comment there below. Who was the president that Paul Coffey met? Is it A, John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Thomas Jefferson, or George Washington? So on to number 2, we have Anthony Johnson. Anthony Johnson was a black man who came all the way from Angola in the 1600s. Angola is actually a country in the southwestern part of Africa. It borders Namibia. The capital city of Angola is actually called Luanda. And Angola had a queen. It has a history of a queen called Njinga, and I did a story about Njinga in one of the videos in the past. So let's talk about Anthony Freeman, who went to America in the 1600s. And that time, you know, there were blacks and whites who were slaves. Black slaves started working in the 1700s, but those times blacks and whites, so long as you were a peasant, you were considered a slave. Even in the Irish days, in the England days, if you were a peasant, you could not pay land rent. You know, like right now we are paying rent for our houses, but back then you used to pay rent for your land. So if you are poor, you are considered a slave. So he went there, and like the immigrants, Johnson worked as a contract laborer with the promise of a land grant from a colony upon completing his task. Just like Jacob from the Bible, he worked hard for all those years so that he can be getting land as a lease. So what did Anthony Jackson do the moment he got the land? He worked on a tobacco piece of land, and he gained his freedom, and he ended up purchasing 250 acres of land and ran his own successful business on the farm. So John Casa was a black servant working for Johnson, and eventually sought to be released from his servitude. So apart from Anthony Jackson being a freed black man in the United States, he owned a slave called Jackson, and Jackson worked for him. And as always, the same way he was a freed man, he freed Jackson, and Jackson also went ahead and of course gained some land. So on to number 3, we have William Ellison Jr. William Ellison Jr. was the son of a white planter. Of course, this is a colored person. White planter called William Ellison Sr. So he was born in 1790 as April Ellison. Those days, it was a custom for the black people to call their children based on the months of the year. So you will find someone called January or Januarius, someone called Junos, someone called Augustus, someone called Julio. So you used to find a lot of that. So our friend here was called April Ellison. And because it was customary back then, he was born in the month of April, so he was called that way. So around the age of 12, Ellison Jr. became an apprentice under Mark Markenheit. Someone could wonder, is it this child labor? Back then, even in the 1900s, you could find a 10-year-old who is going out to sell newspapers to people. You could find a 9-year-old selling. That is as late as the 1900s. So back then, a 12-year-old was enough to be a soldier, was enough to be someone to do apprenticeship and sailorship. So he was a builder, and he learned how to build and repair cotton gins, which gave him a lot of money. So Ellison, by the end of all this, owned a 900. Wow. From 116, we have a 250 acre, now we have a 960 acre piece of land of cotton plantation worth 58,000 euros, which is worth a lot of money. So according to the 1800 census, he owned at least 33 slaves. This is a colored person who owned 33 slaves during that time. So on to number 4, we have Antoine Dubuchet. Antoine Dubuchet, you can call it anyway, your pronunciation, how you can call it. You can call it Dubuchet, you can call it Dubuquet, Dubuchet, Dubuchet. So for me, I'm calling him Antoine Dubuchet, who was born in 1810 in Louisiana. His father was a planter who owned around 406 acres of land and had 70 slaves. These are black person we are talking about. And Dubuchet ended up marrying a wealthy woman who helped him to acquire more land. And by combining his assets, he was making around 95,000 US dollars. And he had a lot of wealth for his planters during his time. So in the aftermath of the Civil War, that was in 1865, the Civil War happened in 1865 during the reign of Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant, together with Andrew Jackson. But mostly it happened during the Abraham Lincoln reign, where he was trying to unite the North and the South. It was very much divided because Abraham Lincoln was trying to stop slavery in America. So that is one of the factors that led Abraham Lincoln to be assassinated. So during this period, this guy, he had the southern plantation industry suffered greatly. So during this period, his industry in the southern part suffered greatly because the Southern supported, the South shall rise again. The Southern supported Abraham Lincoln because most of the slaves came from the South. There's this slogan, like I've said, the South will rise again. So this is where they supported Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's move to abolish slavery. So because there was no fluid movement of goods from the southern to the northern part, you could find that there was a lot of issues in the plantation and he suffered greatly. In 1868, I think this was during the reign of Andrew Jackson, Andrew Johnson, who was actually the 17th president of America before giving it over to Ulysses S. Grant. In 1868, he was elected as state treasurer of the state of Louisiana. So Louisiana actually was governed by black people. So he was elected treasurer because he had money, he couldn't steal from the state. And he faced the healthy task of identifying Louisiana financially involved in solving. Okay, so Anthony Dubuchet was actually elected the treasurer of the state of Louisiana, and we're going to look at, in the next video, the 5 governors who used to reign over the states of America who are actually black. And actually next time I will talk about the first black presidents of America. Do you know Barack Obama was not the only black president of America? There were other black presidents before him. And actually, if it wasn't for some issues, Franklin Douglas would have actually been the 16th president of America and the first black president. He stepped down for Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s. So on to number 5, where we're dealing with James Forten. So James Forten was actually one of the most wealthiest businessmen in the 1700s, and he was a black man, and he was born in the 1760s. So he was from the county. He was actually in the Navy. James Forten was actually in the Navy. He was the greatest businessman of all time. And do you know James Forten, when he died at the age of 84, he was buried by white people. White people are actually in his burial ground, in his graveyard. He was buried by white people. So after the ordeal of being in the Royal Louis vessel as a navy at the age of 15, he managed to start a business, and he started making sailing in the age of 1830s. He was estimated to own around $100,000. That's about $2.5 million right now, which is actually some 20 trillion shillings in Kenya. Wow, that's a lot of money. So he was a very wealthy man. Like I've said earlier, during his death, white people came and he was buried with white people. He was a very influential person. He had joined politics. There's a whole story about James Forten. Benjamin Banneker. Benjamin Banneker was born in 1732. He was a scientist, an inventor, and a mathematician during those eras of the Industrial Revolution in the United States of America. He was a black man, freed slave, and he was very good in his inventions, and most of his inventions are actually used today. So Benjamin Banneker is recognized as a businessman who made money from his inventions, more or less like Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was a white guy who entered into the politics and all that. So my dear viewer over there, that was all for today about the 5 black people who were actually freed slaves, who are the wealthiest people in the United States. So remember to like, subscribe, and share, and keep it always locked on R&I TV. This content will be airing each and every Wednesday on your screens, and like I said, this is the next biggest thing on your screens. So see you next time. My name is Espila Caleb. Remember to leave the comment below, and anytime the first person to leave the comment below, I'll be the first one to read the comment out loud. So keep it locked, keep it locked. See you next time.
Oh, you should be trapping.